Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our IGP101 session this month. And this month it's called, let me deliver it. So you want to analyze patterns? I don't know what accent was going on there, but it's like one of those things that, when you learn about a subject, your eyes almost are the equivalent of bigger than your stomach in terms of when you're eating a meal. So all these patterns all of a sudden it's like they are more and more apparent to you, and it's hard to sometimes distinguish which ones are within your reaching capabilities and which ones are not. So actually, without delving so deep into the analyzing of patterns, I want to talk a lot about around it as well. Okay, and I will in like read your comments and your questions, I guess, in the chat. So feel free to drop them in there. And if I need to postpone it to later or cut and chop and change, we'll do that. Basically, I want to make this an hour long. And in terms of what you'll be doing, I haven't planned fully that we will be drawing. But when I was doing the plan for today, one of the patterns that I was asked to analyze, I analyzed and I thought, oh, I could draw that with you guys. So maybe at the end we might draw. So just to give you a little bit of warning, if you do want to join in with that, your compass, your straight edge, your plain piece of paper and a pencil might be useful, but it might not happen. So that's why I didn't really plan for it fully. Live says Assalamu alaikum and hello from Cape Town to everybody. So excited to be here, excited to have you. Okay, let us get started. Okay, I might just close that chat for a second. Okay, let's see if we can get going. So, my kind of approach to everything is quite practical minded. So when you are first learning about patterns, you essentially do have to manage your expectations because a lot of the times the excitement, and I've experienced this, the excitement and the kind of keenness means that you want to run before you can walk. And what you will find is with every pattern you are drawing, learning to draw, you learn to see. So the two go hand in hand. It's as though you have to put in the hours, okay? And also it doesn't come easy. So the whole process of learning to use these tools accurately enough for you to be able to execute it to the level you want, for you to be able to be happy with it, and reach that kind of level of accuracy that is so inherent to these patterns, that takes time. So I would say just be ready to fail and kind of accept that as the bumps in your road, in your journey, they are inevitable. But also, I think one of the things that I recognize in myself is resilience. So be ready to bounce back. Like I have drawn something 7, 8, 9 times. I still to this day draw something repeatedly, partially because I want to learn it for sufficiently inside out, all the kind of the trip ups and all the kind of possible ways to do it. I want to learn that fully before I teach it. So I have a different maybe reason for me to really kind of repeat. But before I even started teaching, I would never say that there was one drawing that I did and then I painted it and it was complete. Like it's a rare thing. So just have this idea that your first drawing is your first take. And I think I've said that sufficiently enough on my Patreon that I can hear that back in other people as well. So then I'm like, yes, that's the kind of approach. Because there does need to be a certain approach. And when you're learning these patterns, you learn so much about yourself. You learn whether you are patient or not, whether you get frustrated or not, and what frustrates you. You really kind of get an analysis of yourself through the kind of the processes of drawing and painting Islamic geometric patterns. This is a good one, I must say, leaving things for later. So when I first started, Facebook had a really active, great book for this book group for discussions about Islamic geometric patterns. It was started by Alan Adams, and some of the things on there, I'd be like, yep, following along, I get what's going on, and then I just wouldn't get what anyone was talking about. Like the language, the visuals, everything was way beyond me at that time. And so I have a very sensible approach. I'm like, yep, save it for later. And I have since then returned to some of those patterns that I found hard. And some of them I'm still saving for later. So, like that keenness, it's got to be managed. And sorry to be like Little Miss lecture on you, but I think these are really important things. And so that's why I want to share them. Okay. So I did request sending me patterns, and I got a few, and I think I've tried to use them all. And what was really interesting to me is, firstly, geometry, symmetry, pattern. These are not qualities unique and only to be found exclusively in the world of Islamic patterns, patterns found in the Islamic lands, patterns found in the areas that we know historically. You find them in other places as well. So I wanted to show you one of the examples or sets of patterns that was sent to me by Catherine. I put all the names in there so I wouldn't forget. And what she wrote, I hope I've got this right, is when she went to this place, Penang Peranakan Mansions, I think that's in Thailand. I'm gonna guess, yeah, Thailand. She said these were the patterns that got her started and thinking about patterns in general and then led her to Islamic geometric patterns. So then I was like, yes, these are beautiful, but they're not Islamic geometric patterns as we know them. So what makes patterns Islamic geometric patterns? What are the visuals we are looking for? So let's just have a look at each of them. As you can see, they are very, very beautiful, but there's some characteristics that they have that might be more associated with other areas and other visuals from other architecture in other parts of the world. For me, what comes to mind is Spain, but not necessarily the Islamic Spain, more so the things that came after that you associate with maybe the tiles of Portugal. But again, these aren't my expertise, but it's just what they are reminding me of. Okay, so if we have a look at this one, the thing that I'm going to sort of point out is when we are looking at Islamic geometric patterns, we want to notice the stars. Okay, actually, before I go to Catherine's, I'm going to do the thing I wanted to do. Oh, no, no, let's do Catherine's and we'll do that. So we are noticing stars and we're noticing lines of symmetry. But often in Islamic geometry, the lines of symmetry are hidden, like they're kind of not explicitly there. So the first thing about this pattern is you can see these green lines. They are the lines of symmetry, and you can see the stars are literally divided into 4 and into 8. So there's an explicitness to their symmetrical qualities. If, say, we did remove some of those lines, we would have quite a few spaces that are sort of unresolved, unpatterned, don't have any features. So still, it wouldn't be quite Islamic geometric patterns as we know them. So the issue with this one, what wouldn't put it into the category is that the lines of symmetry are quite explicit. Now, anything I say, this applies to a lot of the patterns, IGP patterns, but not necessarily every single one. There's so many rules that can be broken and still create something within this field. Something like this, okay? You've got these beautiful 2 square beigey tiles between everything. They're completely plain, and the patterns are just in some areas. So again, this pattern is beautiful, but you can see explicitly how it's been divided up and how it's repeating, and the actual kind of patterns are just in some areas, not continuous, not throughout. Again, with this one, you can see how it's repeating. So you can see one large square within that, another square within that, another square. So these are themes that you definitely see. You definitely see in Islamic geometric patterns, but it's more so hidden. I don't want to do that hidden, and you are seeing it through the pattern rather than seeing the actual squares. This one is probably the closest, but again, we're seeing a circle. So yes, we do have circles in Islamic geometric patterns, but they don't necessarily surround the rosette so explicitly. They're disappeared. You see here the lines of symmetry as well. So it's like the beauty of these patterns is there, but alongside that we can see how they are drawn quite, I think, clearly. And another one. Okay. This one is the one I want to finish off. So this is from Penang, but look at how close it is to what we associate with Islamic geometric patterns. It's got a 12-pointed star. Within it, it's got a different star, but between them, maybe there isn't such a resolution that we're used to. We're not used to seeing it immediately become this shape. It's been made into a 3D, almost like a compass style star. And what's most important about this is the lines are not continuous from one unit to another. So if I go from this star to this star, there's a gap. So the continuity and flow that we look for in Islamic geometric patterns is lacking here. But perhaps if we extended this line, extended some of the others, we could get close to what we associate with a 12-fold star or a 12-pointed star pattern. So how do we recognize Islamic geometric patterns? So firstly, the context is super important. So where you find these patterns, the architecture, the time, the place, all of these really matter. And that's able to identify for you, oh yeah, this is coming from a place that was ruled by Muslims at such and such time, and they built such and such palace, mausoleum, house, mosque, and so on and so forth. The next thing is that idea of continuity and seamless flow. I love this about, that infinite quality that we see in geometric patterns, that they're just repeating seamlessly. You can't see the stitch. You have to kind of put a layer on top of it to pick out the lines of symmetry, to pick out how it's flowing and what's repeating. So this idea that we have this hidden underlying grid that we know probably quite well because we've drawn maybe a circle and another circle, another square, and by the time we've drawn our pattern, all of those features are like no longer there. So it's the pattern versus the underlying grid, where some geometric patterns from other parts of the world, other cultures, historically, they might have been kind of with the underlying grid, and there might be some kind of plain spaces. I was about to call them dead spaces, but I thought that's so like offensive. But there might be plain spaces in between the kind of the big stars, like the motif here and the motif here, but between it there's maybe a plain space. You won't find that necessarily in many geometric patterns from the Islamic lands because there's a continuity and flow, and every place and space is resolved. And therefore, you kind of are really emphasizing that continuity and that flow. Before I say stars and rosettes, I want to say in those gaps and plain spaces, you could say there are shapes that each of them throughout the pattern have their own symmetrical properties. So there'll be features on it where it'll have a line of symmetry, or that, it'll have some quality about it. And the pattern has symmetrical qualities. So the symmetry, it's in the shapes individually, and it's in the shapes collectively. And the shapes that we often associate with Islamic geometric patterns are stars. So 5-pointed, 4-pointed, 6-pointed, 10-pointed, all of those pointed stars, and also more so rosettes. So that's where you have an inner star surrounded by something that you could describe as petals, and the nature of those petals varies. And then by the time they get to another star, there's many shapes in between, and depending on how complex they are, you can have a whole bunch of shapes. So as much as I'm trying to state sort of a bunch of features and rules can be broken, and they have historically been broken in many patterns. So sometimes do we have the eye to know, oh, this is a pattern that's sort of like not following kind of the rules as we know them. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. One thing that you can be sure of is the patterns that are in manuscripts, okay, that's made by maybe a single artist fitting a pattern into a book. So every time I've seen a pattern that might have been distorted, maybe stretched, maybe strangely resolved, it's often not in architecture, it's often in a manuscript or on a frontispiece of a Quran. And so you can visualize the making process is maybe one person making that book. Or when it's architecture, you would know there's many more people involved. So for it to end up being wrong on that scale isn't as common. So anything I'm saying, there's exceptions to it. So there's many manuscripts that are entirely perfect and beautiful, and there may be examples in architecture which kind of break the rules. Okay. All right, we're going to have a look at some pattern analysis, if we may. And I'm going to get out three things. Jules Bourgoin's book, some tracing paper, and tape and pencil. So we're going to get very, very, what's the word? Low quality, lo-fi. I'm just going to make sure my camera will switch on nicely. And let's see if I can share my desktop. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything they would like to say or share? Okay, it's deadly quiet. Please do. It's not necessarily just me talking. You know, I can talk, but I want to be able to engage with you as well. So, literally, I've just got a pile of tracing paper and this book. The reason why I think this book is good is because although it has errors in it, it's really useful for me to just be able to flick through an abundance of patterns quickly without having to kind of mess around too much. So I'm going to be a bit bold and I'm going to start somewhere random. Let's start here. Okay. So when we're analyzing patterns, I want to be able to show you these kind of key things that make us able to see the repeat. And I might do it quite bold and messily, but where did I get this green tape from? It's very bold. Okay, so here's our pattern. I have no idea of the context. When you look at Bourgoin's patterns, there's a document made by Tony Lee where he's tried to find the reference and the source for each of them. I put them all on I put this book, the soft copy of it because it's out of copyright, and Tony Lee's PDF. I put them all on my books page. So if anyone is available to just put the link in the chat, just so you know, and I'll put it in the post. So when you're looking at a pattern, to find the repeat, you want to find the centers of stars. And when you have a few of them, so in this case, it's quite easy because they're above and below and left and right of each other. So you can say, this is your repeat unit. Now, this is a four-sided shape and it's a square. So some patterns, when they repeat, they'll fit into a square, and then you will then create this pattern and then tile it by, in this case, just literally translating it. So you're not rotating it, you're not having to, you don't have to rotate it, you don't have to reflect it. It's the same either side of this line. Now, the thing is, something like this, to break it down further, I'm going to zoom in a bit. Look how wobbly my line just went. You can start seeing that essentially in this pattern, that's all I can do. This is the part that is repeating. And here you can see, you can describe the movement from here to here as it's been rotated around the center, or you could say it's been reflected. So some patterns have rotational symmetry and reflection symmetry. So therefore this has landed on here, and then here and here. So it could be that it's been rotated, rotated, rotated around the central point, and you end up with a unit, and that's the unit you then copy, paste, 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 paste. And even if you picked it up and copied it and slightly rotated it by accident, you didn't notice, as long as you're making sure it's meeting side to side, you've got that. Now, something like this, to break this down, it's useful to have circles. So sometimes I'm going to just draw a sketch of a circle. I don't want to go too much into this, but you've got one circle, two circles, potentially three circles. And on this one, you've got potentially one and then one circle. So when you start analyzing patterns, circles are useful. And this one, having picked a really unusual one, by the way, I can't see very easily. I think it's actually maybe a dodgy-ish pattern. But what I can say is I recognize this star very clearly. I recognize this star very clearly. But then meeting with this rhombus, it feels a little unusual. Okay. So that's one kind of pattern. Let's pick up somewhere else another one. And I just want to do a couple of these so that, when you sit down with a book and you want to start analyzing something, you can do the same. I'm picking random things to be honest, because I think principally wise, there's something useful going on. Okay, I actually want a bigger tracing paper. I was actually even wondering how many tracing papers will I get through to do this, but it's okay. Okay, so although I've randomly picked this, I can sort of say what the reason is. Joanna's asked, can you remind us what book this is again? This is Jules Bourgoin. He was a 19th century explorer from France who traveled around, I would say, Cairo and other places in the Middle East, and basically used plates, the ones that are used for printing, to record these patterns. And it's a really good collection of patterns and has been used by many people since, but also it's got some flaws in it, but I still think it's a really good resource. Okay, now my first principle is to pick out some centers. Now you can see the pattern hopefully as clearly as I can, and if you want to in the chat, tell me any properties you can see or say. So we'll talk about the rosette. So if anybody wants to tell me anything about the rosette, please tell me. It's got a central star. It's surrounded by kites, and it's then got these petals. This is a special rosette because you could say it's stellated because the petals extend even further into these points. So therefore it can be called a stellated rosette, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 petals. But these petals are quite unusual. But now let's have a look at the arrangement. So I'm going to put dots in the center of the patterns because I want to see where the repeat is. So I can see, I might just draw straight lines. This is something repeating, not just once, but several times. And I want to go even further in. Quarter patterns are really, really useful because essentially from this rosette to this rosette, this quarter has everything we need to know about the pattern, because then that is a thing that is then reflected in this case or rotated to get the whole. Ari, I see an offset square like a square bricks or a four-way rotational symmetry. Yep, I see that too, the four-way rotational symmetry. So the other thing you can think of is if I connect the center to the center, you've actually got the triangle that makes the repeat unit fully. So actually, even within our square and even our previous square, if we'd cut it in half, this is in fact the triangle that repeats. And yet again, I picked a square. Okay, so then this is what you would analyze. And often you see patterns being analyzed in a quarter because when you analyze it in a quarter, it contains all the information you need for you to be able to draw the rest of the pattern. Okay, I'm going to leave that paper here because I should have left that other paper there for me to flip back to. Let's have a look at this one. So I know I'm kind of doing the same thing, but I value it because it's a nice way to kind of just look at and see patterns. Okay, so have a look at this. So here there's a lot of information, but I'm going to find the centers of my star, and the stars are a little bit different to what we've seen before. And what you might find is here, the stars, they won't make a square. Does that make sense? Like how if I try to configure these, I won't be able to make it into square. Oh, I've missed some comments from the previous one. Douglas says, and you can split that triangle again. Yes, you can. So that, and you can divide the quarter into quarters and it would have what you need. Quarter into quarters. Where, yeah, you're both saying the same thing in a really like cool way, because that is a quarter, and it's a quarter of the quarter. Boom. Thank you. Okay, I'm so loving this. Sorry, is it too much excitement over tracing paper and plans? Okay, so now we've got this pattern. I want to zoom in more. No, I can't. So we have got still a rectangle that can be drawn. Okay, but this is a key. All these patterns, however complicated they get, you can pin down one quality, which is they can all be reduced to or essentially become a rectangle, which then we can quarter again. And sometimes, we could just look on this one. This one, can you see the quartering of this is now a little bit trickier because all of a sudden you've got a star and you've got a star here and it's not in the corners. Whereas previously we could just take the square, half it, like, and then get a quarter triangle. Whereas here it's a little bit different. So this introduces you to the idea. Yes, it's still a rectangle, but what you might notice is this is the kind of essentially the half of the pattern, and you would have to take this, pick this up, rotate it to this corner, and it's exactly the same. So you still have that quality that this is a, although this is a whole, half of it and half of it is the same. And somewhere in amongst this, let's see if we can not ruin it, there is a triangle that is repeating, but it's repeating three of them. Okay, so can you see? I might pause on it for a little bit. This is reflected here, is reflected here. So there is a like a triangle at the heart of the squares. That's a bit easier to see, and there's a triangle at the heart of the rectangles. But if you can find the rectangles by connecting the centers of the stars, you've got a way in. Okay, so that I think is really powerful. Okay, I want to find a
Wait,
harder one.
can
Yeah,
we pause for one moment?
yes,
Because
please.
I'm seeing the hexagon, but when you're analyzing patterns to figure them out, are you saying that the rectangles and the squares are going to be more productive than
Yeah,
pulling
100%.
that hexagon?
Yeah, so when I first started, I was maybe indifferent to whether I could see the pattern as a hexagon or as a rectangle. Well,
Hmm.
we'll forget rectangle, we'll say quadrilateral, a four-sided
Right.
shape, right? So, but then when you start seeing that actually everything can fit into a rectangle, and that rectangle's proportions will change, then I thought, well, that's a really powerful thing that links my pattern that I'm analyzing to other ones. Whereas if I keep it as a hexagon, there's a ceiling on what I can connect it to. And actually, in my teaching experience, hexagons are really hard for people to tile. They want to somehow tile them very squarely, so left, right, above, and below, rather
Uh-huh.
than tile it like
Yeah.
they should do, like this. Because actually, when you're tiling hexagons, and I've plenty of hexagon works, they're such an enticing shape. I love them to bits. Love them to bits. But when you're tiling something which is a hexagon, you basically can you see that it's not
Uh-huh.
it's one above, one below, but these two and these two are sometimes trickier to see. So if
Yes.
you can slightly kind of see the rectangle, give it a nod, give it a smile, but try to see the hexagon, give it a nod and a smile, but actually try to see the rectangle. I think that's probably more beneficial as you learn and as you see more because it'll connect to more.
Got it.
Great
Thank you.
question. I think you're mind
And
readers, by the way. Hello.
Samira, isn't a square or rectangular-ish shape going to be easier and more accurate to tile as well as something that's not?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Like when you're first drawing, if you try to tile a hexagon, and I've been there teaching people, it's really tricky. But as soon as you've got the straight edges, 90-degree corners, even if they're stretched or squished or squashed, they are easier for us to see because we are so, I think, attuned to perpendicularness and right angles. We just love them, I think. So yeah, I do think that's the premium advantage of it when you're first starting. It's just easier to repeat. Are we trying to find the smallest possible unit that we repeat? You know what? Actually, if we look, the smallest possible unit is this. And my slight issue is always trying to find it, is that I then you can't see the whole pattern easily. So actually knowing that there is a small repeat unit inside your repeat unit is good. And if we kind of, I would say, aim to do one hole and maybe quarters in the corners, then you're able to see what you're drawing a bit better. But if you do ever see, like, for example, it's so powerful. If I change one little thing in this tiny little triangle, it would have such a massive impact on everything. So it's really important to know that, the thing that's ruling everything in here is a very small repeat unit, and it's repeated by reflection, rotation, and then this slide rotation. But inherently there is one small triangle. But would I say that's something I love to draw and draw? No, no, no. I draw more. I draw bigger. That's a little bit of attitude in me. Nah, I don't draw that. Okay, I'm trying to find tens. Let's see if I can find tens. There's some wild patterns in here, by the way. As I'm going through it, I was like, I need to have a little bit more of a eye on it. Okay, we're going to a classic. Um, do you know what? I'm going to chop my tracing paper. Just unless I reuse them. Yeah, I can reuse them. I'll sit here rubbing out these lines afterwards because I'm one of those people that can't waste things.
What
Okay,
page number
so
is that?
this page number is 171. Okay, so for this pattern, we have got yet another rosette. It seems quite intense and packed. So let's have a look at the centers. Again, I'm dotting them really prominently for you to be able to see. And when I was saying rectangle, and I sort of corrected myself because I was like, we don't want to keep saying rectangle, we want to say quadrilateral. There's a reason for that. Because if you look at this pattern, let's firstly pick out the characteristics. We've got a 10 pointed star surrounded by 10 kites, surrounded by petals, this shape, and the petals have parallel sides. And let's not forget the most important shape, this star. And because this is a 10-fold rosette, these 5-pointed stars are entirely perfectly regular. You'll find them in a lot of patterns, but they're not always perfect and regular pentagrams. They're the best they can be in the situation they are, a bit like humans. Okay, so let's have a look at this pattern. So we can get a rectangle from it. And what you might notice, if I was to overlay all my shapes, that I had a square, I had a rectangle, they're all different proportions. But I sort of paused and also can show you that the repeat unit can be, oh, my internet says it's unstable. Okay, the repeat unit can also be a rhombus. So let's look for the repeat. And here you can see, I would say much clearer than you can see on here, how it's repeating. Okay, so if I can find my repeat unit here, let's do it. It's slightly, I guess, different. Oh, it's like the Union Jack. So this repeating unit has all the information we need in it for us to draw the pattern, the same here. But if I was to draw it, I would like to draw more of a repeat so that when I'm doing the geometry, I can get more accuracy across the drawing and I can see more. Because like I said, the drawing and the seeing go together. So if I can see more of the pattern, it does help. Now, talking about fivefold, what I want you to notice, if I can draw another thing here, is can you see the distance between the rosettes? If I was to put a line between them, they're literally touching petal to petal. Now, what would happen if we took these petals and made the distance between them further apart? Oh, I'm going to say look at that one, but I'm going to pause and find another one. Let's go to the back. Whoa, let's go crazy. Sorry. Hi, Sarah Beth. Oh, sorry about that. No worries. Okay, let's have a look at this. And this sort of leads into one of the patterns that somebody sent me. So here, this is super, super complicated. And this is where I want to, am I picking out the pattern I want to? Yeah. If you look for the centers of the stars, it's like, where on earth is another star? Like, it's so far apart. It's off my page, like from there to there. You might have to help me if I can't see it, but if I now draw a line up to here, this is one long rectangular unit. So in a way, I'm sort of exaggerating the point, but from the center of the star to the center of the star, there's so many other shapes and other repetition. And this is where I'm like, save it for later. Because I've never analyzed something like this. And what I want to give you a sense of is that the further the stars are, as in apart to each other, the more complicated the pattern. So this one, look at how much intricacy there is between them and compare it to this, where they're literally touching each other. Okay, so this idea of, if you're able to identify the centers of stars and what's between them, lots of shapes, few shapes, that will really help you identify the complexity of the pattern. And is it one that you can dive into, or is it the one that you're going to save for later? Okay, I think something just happened. Hello. Oh, I'm still here. It looked like I'd switched off. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments or anything? Please do say so. Okay. Okay. All right. No worries. Okay, so like I said, when I was sitting there with my Bourgoin patterns, you could be sitting there with any pattern, and it could be a nice idea to firstly identify centers of stars. And I use tracing paper. Because I don't want to ruin my books. Like, I don't want to ruin things. You could take a printout and you could do the same. And then you're looking at lines of symmetry, and you can see how some of them are a little bit more straightforward and some are not. But these things that when you're learning to draw, learning to see, some of them will come to a nice fruition and some of them may not. So kind of be ready for that. Okay, so we're going to do look at some of the patterns that were sent to me. And this one was sent to me, I can't even see by who, by Laura. And this is a little bit of an annoying thing for you, because when I saw this pattern, I was like, I recognize this. I know this pattern. Seen it before. So this is the thing that actually will come with time. Okay, so I didn't try to analyze it. I just went to my little book. So let me see if I can hold or show you the book, because it's a nice one to share. And let me see if I can show you. Okay, so yeah, I literally didn't even analyze it that much. I just went to this book of mine. So this book is by Manuel Martinez Velez, and I know it's expensive and hard to get hold of, but it is this idea that I don't start things from scratch every time, because if I think about my time, I don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time. So I'm sort of standing always on the shoulders of giants. The people that came before me, if they've done some work, I won't start from zero. I will start from their work. And we're all links in the chain. So that pattern, I was like, yep, I recognize it. It is the same one, right? And then this would be something I would have a go at drawing. Now, the thing is, when I draw patterns, it's so easy when someone's done all the hard work for you to then, yeah, I'll tweak that, I'll change that, I'll fix that and make it sort of like efficient or better. And Manuel, I've met him, and he when he talked about this book and his other first books, he was like, oh, I've improved this, that since then, I've changed that since then. So, these methods, sometimes they can be refined, but essentially, the step-by-step guide is there. Maybe I can have a look at this and it can be something I can teach properly later on in the year, maybe. So yeah, I'm basically using some of these patterns as a ways of me getting hold of like patterns to share later. Okay, so yeah, when you see a pattern and maybe you can't find or figure out how to do it, what will come with you continuing that process of learning and drawing and seeing is some patterns, you'll recognize them, and then maybe you'll be able to figure out where they're from and how somebody else has taught them and how you can have a go from their teachings. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the doors that Samin Mughal sent. And let's firstly just say it's from the Suleimani Mosque in Istanbul. And when you have something that grand, you know it's going to be super, super grand and beautiful. And I thought it was a useful thing if I showed you what I would do with that pattern if I were to analyze it, because I would use something called Snapseed, which is an app to straighten your photos. So I imagine this is something that people often are, like trying to analyze pictures, but they haven't got straight photos. So how on earth do you straighten them? Let me show you. I get so excited about the simplest things. Okay. Okay, so this app, let's zoom in a bit. Let's see how far I can get it in. If I come out of it, it's just called Snapseed. And let's see if I can open up so it's clear. Is that clear? Yes, it is. So I've got a pen with my phone. Yes, I'm that fancy. So you can just open up any photo. So I opened up this one, and I highly recommend this app. It's free and it's superb. So it's got all these tools, and within it, there's one tool that is the best. It's called Perspective. Okay. So even if you don't, oh, Nisha's saying iPhone camera edits will do this as well. I'm not an iPhone person. Okay, so if you can add it on your phone, look, there's me like trying to sort of make some amazing statement about this, and yeah, it's all on your phones already. But no, it's a really good thing. So if you can see how you can straighten it, oh my goodness, it makes such a world of difference. Because in a second, when I show you what I do with the patterns, especially on Geogebra, then it's really useful. So the first thing is I straightened it. Now I'm going to crop it. And in cropping it, I'm sort of going to keep the two doors, but probably not. But you can see already like how useful it is just to be able to see the pattern flat. This is such a treat. Thank you. I love all the treasures in Turkey. This is from iPhone 10. Thank you, iPhone 10. It's like some sort of iPhone takeover in the last two comments. Okay, the next thing you want to do is, if I go to my tools, I'm going to crop it even more actually. And what's useful for when you're doing any sort of work with your phones, with your pictures, is to really heighten the contrast. It's called Snapseed. So like something like this really makes the lines show up. Maybe we don't want it so saturated. So the edit, whatever you want to edit it in, it's useful to just make it somehow easier for you to see the pattern. So straightening it and also giving a high contrast is super cool. Something like this, I normally just send it to myself by WhatsApp. I have WhatsApp on my laptop, and then I just send it to myself, whatever means you do. Okay, so I just wanted to show you something that often is like that hidden layer and stuff we do. But imagine I've sent it to myself. And let's have a look. Okay. So this is the app, but as Nisha said, you can also probably do it in other apps. What I find in life is if you're doing something and you've been doing it on something well for ages and you become quicker on it, the world might have changed, but you're not going to change your app necessarily. Okay, so this is the same pattern, and just for the fact that we are our screens are widescreen, I've made it horizontal. So it's the same door, but I wanted to give it that same approach in terms of analyzing it, because there's something really cool about this pattern. There's a straight-sided rosette in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And in the corners, you can just about see them. There's a star and 1, 2 and a half. So this is also a rosette in this corner, in the bottom, top left corner and right corner. In the middle, there's a different type of rosette, and in the other corners there's this rosette. So your kind of lines of symmetry, you can see that this quarter is being reflected left and right, up and down. And if you look for the centers of your stars, yes, there's one here, here and here, but have a look up here. Doesn't it seem like there's something going on outside of the door? So yeah, there's one above and one below. And then if you look here, although there's this gorgeous detail, which is actually quite relevant to this month's pattern, by the way, I don't know why I said it again so aggressively, there's this another rosette. So actually, this pattern is almost like a game of two halves. There's something going on here, and it's using parallel-sided petals. And there's something going on here, it's using tapered petals. So when I mean tapered, look at this shape, and you can see it's quite a squished petal, but it is tapered. And there's a star somewhere in the middle behind this. And what's very useful to see is the stars in between as well. So here you can see this to this, the stars are between the two petals touching each other. But this to this, look at all that information here. So it's a complicated pattern. And if I'm showing you anything, I'm just showing you how far apart the stars are, how there are different patterns within that, and therefore how complicated it is. Save it for later. And I'm happy to do that. Like, I'm not on a mission to show everything to everybody all the time. I'm on a mission to really delve into sort of the basic intermediate patterns and really, like, if they were like a towel, a wet towel, wring them dry. That's my mission in life. Sorry. Okay, so this idea of the stars being further apart or close together, I really enjoyed going into when I was doing my fivefold fun pattern. So I know this is a very kind of distilled visual, but imagine this star, number one, and this star. They're from the Al-Giri patterns that I taught in the fivefold series, and they're all tutorials that you can work through. I'm really proud of them. I think they're brilliant. So you can have a look through, and if you do it through my website, you can see all the kind of the links of who I've learned from. So these, especially, I learned from Ali Reza Sarvdalir, but lots of teachers that I'd kind of seen their work informed my series. Okay, so this star and this star, they are just literally between them enough space for a pentagon. Here for number 2, you can see they're slightly pulled apart. There's space for a bigger shape. It's sometimes called the tabla, like a drum. The third one, they're pulled apart, and you can see there's space for the pentagon and the tabla. And then this one, there's space for the pattern or the shape that's called the surmadan. So if we just kind of take these 4 examples as the idea of patterns becoming more and more complicated, you can see here how this is Ali Reza Sarvdalir's kind of diagrams. You can see the idea that you still have a quarter of the pattern, then a series of lines. I'm not expecting you to understand this, by the way. I teach this quite fully on my series, but you can see how that one rectangle is then broken into the star, the kite, and the pentagon. And then the second pattern, you start the same, maybe some more lines. The circles are actually probably a little bit smaller. So can you see how they're bigger here, and here they're getting smaller? Because there's more shapes between the stars. And this is a quarter of a star, and this is a quarter of a star. Third one, again, more circles, more shape, more information. But the stars are getting even smaller because there's more shapes in between. So if you do want to kind of delve into this in a kind of ordered way, this series, I think, is quite useful. And then finally, this one, whoa. I really loved this pattern because I was able to access it myself from doing 1, 2, 3, then progressing to 4, rather than just diving into this one straight away. So again, you can see the star and the corners, and there's so many shapes in between, like kite, tabla, kite, and then either side of them, surmadan, pew. So there's lots of shapes. Okay, how are we doing for time? It says I've got 10 minutes, but I might go over for about 5 or 10 because this is the request by Camilla Mazzari, who shared with me artwork by Julie Cat. Stunning, beautiful work. Do look at Julie Cat's work. Impeccable. And she just sort of sent an email saying, how do I analyze this pattern? And I was like, oh, it's really easy. I didn't say that to her, but yeah, no. But before I go on to it, let's go back. Okay, Olivia, any chance you could share that document or a link to if it's available to the public? Which document, Olivia? Please let me know. So would you say that pattern kind of developed from placing the stars like a focal point and then constructing to fill them in between? Yes, I would say that actually. Um, you can almost, so when I was on the summer school course in Spain with Daoud Sutton and Amit Hindacha and let's name them all, Alan Adams and Rajan Asto. Daoud did a series of talks about minbars in Mamluk era minbars in Cairo. And what was so fascinating was that he showed literally through the years the progression in the complexity of the minbars. And essentially, you could say the rosettes got further apart, smaller, and more shapes were resolved in between, almost like a almost like a challenge to themselves for excellence. Does that make sense? And it was so beautiful to see because some of the minbars in Cairo are magnificent and they should be so proud of how far they pushed mathematics and geometry because then it was as though they were fitting in shapes that didn't seem to belong. So, for example, seven-sided shapes or regular pentagons in a 12-fold setting and all of this thing. So essentially, that's a really nice way of putting it, that the further apart the centers of the stars are, the more complicated the patterns are. Unless, I mean, I hate making the bold statement. Olivia, the drawings by Sarvdalir. Okay, so yeah, I have got them on my fivefold page. I feel like I linked everything I learned from him on there, and I think when I made this, I just clicked on my own link. So you might have to have a look in there. If you don't find it, I'll have a look as well. Then I'll see where it was. Okay. Thank you for having a look because I think I basically, because I have no record of what I've done, I have to go to my own website, my own tutorials. Does that even make sense? Okay, so this pattern, let's have a look. So can you see it's repeating 8-pointed star, 8-point star, 8-point star? And now, can I just say we're back to doing something which is a little bit more something we can follow through and actually analyze. So you can see the repeat unit is here and it's a square. Okay, so star to star, what's in between? A nice square. What's in between diagonally? Another square, different size. What's going on? Now, the first thing I noticed about this is this four-pointed star in the middle. It's a little bit odd. It's a little bit unusual. But anyway, I isolated that pattern and let's see if I can see my next slide. I then took it to Geogebra. Okay, so what's really useful about straightening and flattening your photos is you can then have a go on software. I want to draw this actually by hand, but maybe another time I can show you how I went through this. I'm going to open up my Geogebra folder file in a second because what I was able to do is just by setting up a typical structure for a square and literally, so I drew my circle, I drew my dynamic square, I drew my static square. Immediately you can see that that octagon exists and the space outside the octagons align with the stars. So you've got so much for your information already. And therefore I analyzed the pattern and recognized it as something that was more conventional or possible in more conventional sense. But let me just open up my GeoGebra file. Are you ready, GeoGebra file? Where are you? Where is GeoGebra? Okay, this might be me being a bit slow because I thought it was open and now I can't see it. Oh, I can't minimize you. Oh, it is here. Oh, here it is, here it is. Okay, let's try that again. I'm feeling so inconfident. Sorry. Here it is. Okay, so here you can see the GeoGebra file. So if I zoom out, you can see my construction. It was a little bit of a kind of haphazard one. Maybe I'll go through the construction in a second, but what I did and I noticed is you've got this kind of, from Julie Katz's painting, you can see that that star in the middle is really big. But if we were to do it a little bit more correctly, let's zoom in and see why. Can you see if I put my red dot here, then that gives me the conventional dimensions of a pattern where, it's maybe something that you would see a little bit more widely. But like I said, sometimes rules are broken and you see them in architecture. I'm going to see if I can try something. It's called showing you the construction protocol. I learned this. If you ever want to learn anything to do with GeoGebra, I would highly recommend learning with Sarah, oh my God, why am I forgetting your name? Brewer. Because I honestly have learned so much from her, and I don't even practice it all, but I know if I spend more time kind of doing the things I've learned, it will be brilliant. So let's just go through my construction, just so you can get a sense of how I arrived at that drawing. I can't seem to, there we go. Let's see. I hope it's not too embarrassing because my construction is a bit chaotic. But this idea that you can, oh, should I just press play? Oh, I think it wants me to click through them all. Let's try that again. Okay, so you can see how I drew my line. I drew my circle. Let's get it centered properly. And then I put in my other square. I found the point in between and used that to make the circles for my corner stars. And again, this idea of circles really help, but they're not part of the pattern. Is so cool. And then I put in my diagonals. I'm saying in that light-hearted voice, like, yeah, you can follow this. I should have done shorter lines for this, but yeah, I was feeling a little bit lazy. And now you can see how you can outline the pattern quite easily. And this is the thing that is conventional about this pattern. This proportion of these stars in this square, very conventional. But now in the middle, it gets a little bit unconventional. So I put the picture back in because I had it all straight. And this is when I decided, let's see what would happen if we changed the size of that star in the middle. So therefore, I kind of, let's see, let me just press a few more buttons. Yeah, you can see how I arrive at the one I'm after, but if I was to be super conventional, this would be the proportions for it. I think I inadvertently have drawn it. Okay, let's see. Yes, thank you, Brewer. Mathematiste. Yes, Sarah is brilliant, and she's just done something 3D today, which is super. So, you know, if you want to learn about GeoGebra, if you learnt from me, it'd be chaotic, and you'd probably end up with a headache. But if you learnt with Sarah, it'd be very organized, very calm and collected, and you'd learn superbly. So please do give her a shout out. Oh, hi, Bryn. Okay, all right, so it's come up to 10 o'clock, not 10 o'clock, flipping it, 8 o'clock, and I didn't realize I was going to draw this. Let me just see if there's anything else in my PowerPoint that I wanted to share, because if not, I am going to call it a day. Yeah, so use it, oh, that was the end. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. So it's really hard, I would say, to kind of distill all the things about analyzing patterns into like an hour. But I hope there's some good key takeaways that might help you kind of either have a go or save it for later and just continue learning. But does anyone have any questions or comments? Anything? Because it's a loop of knowledge, and I learn as much from you as you learn from me, guys.
I have a question. I'm still trying to understand the what's it called? The circles that have the standard size that you put into like the corners there, and how you make a decision about the radius of those circles. Because what I've noticed, they're not consistent. That sometimes they'll be wider, sometimes they're smaller. And so how do you decide?
So, when you look at a pattern, you know this idea of your how far and how close apart they are. You find with any family of symmetry that there are go-to structures that are in place that can be applied to multiple patterns. Okay, whether you recognize them or whether you're familiar with those go-to structures and proportions is another thing. So I'll tell you a story about me and Zelige patterns. When I was in Morocco, I analyzed the same pattern 3 different times, thinking this is a new pattern I've never seen before. I'm going to analyze this. And I fully went for it and analyzed it 3 different times because I didn't recognize that it was something I knew. So this idea of learning about the size of the circles, they're going to keep on varying until you start collecting together collections of, I guess, patterns and proportions. And the ones that are, I would say, the ones that are less complicated are six-fold patterns. Okay, because in a way, a six-pointed star and a six-pointed star, and the spaces in between is almost limited. And so they're a good place to start for you to start thinking about, okay, this is the size of the circle and circle for this pattern. Okay, let me have a look at another pattern. Is it different? Is it the same? And you'll find more or less that they are similar for that. But they are going to vary because there's an abundance of patterns. But they're not going to be every single one unique. There'll be repeats. So there'll be patterns that share proportions. There'll be patterns that they've shared proportions, change the nature of the stars. There's patterns that change I can't speak, share proportions. The stars might be the same, but the space in between might be resolved differently. So it's hard to say in an easy way, yeah, the circles are categorized in a certain number of ways. Does that
There
make
was something
sense?
that you were saying actually just before this question about the
Yeah,
last pattern that we saw in Geogebra, where
yeah,
you were saying like, oh, you know, the way that this particular image is a little bit unusual in that it's this size, but if you make it this size, then it looks more conventional. And I was
yeah.
looking at it and I realized that basically you were highlighting the difference between it being subdivided in half and subdivided by 2/3. And so like maybe like one half is more common for some pattern and then 2/3 would make it more of a variation. And I was wondering if that might
Yeah.
help.
Yeah, potentially. It's like I don't even recognize how you're describing it because I'm so trained to seeing it in a particular way that I see it as, oh, it has to be an eight-pointed star with a cross in the middle for it to be a proper cross. So when you're saying it, you're saying how it's divided, and I still wouldn't be able to visualize it that way. Doesn't that make that kind of is quite crazy?
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Do you mind
it's
going
like,
back into?
yeah, let's just open it up
Yeah.
again and
I'm sorry,
maybe
I'm
you could
dragging this out,
describe it.
but I'm
No,
so
no, because
interested.
I was like, what?
Oh.
Okay, all right. So, for example, I think that you're seeing is a third, and this is almost half.
That
Is
would
that what
be
you?
like something like that. I mean, kind of. Oh, actually, the midpoint between them would be one half. Like that would be
Yeah.
the.
So that
Do you see the
midpoint,
vertical line? That's like the
yes,
midpoint.
yeah,
Yeah.
that midpoint gives you no sort of a star or cross at all. It just gives you
Right.
a triangle, and a square. So you have to kind of go past them
Yeah.
um, to get to this one, and then to
Oh,
get to the proportions, like you can see what I'm aiming for here. I'm aiming for this
yeah.
intersection, and you have to get to
Yes.
that intersection to get the typical eight pointed, no, four and eightfold family proportions and shapes. So this cross, if you look carefully, can you see there's this here, this square? This cross is based on an eight-pointed star. So it's part of the language of these shapes. If I can pick out one little book, let me just show you. I like these side questions, and I have some books open on my side just in case we had them. So I'm glad that we are having these. So here we go. Let me just show you the thing that's on my desktop. Um, my computer always says to show the second camera, it has a button called advanced, and I always think you're not advanced, Samira. I take it as a personal attack. Okay, so the book I've now got in front of me is Arts and Crafts of the Islamic Lands. And the page that I'm turned to is from the section. So this is a great book for basically a wealth of knowledge and information. And I'm turned to the section. I want to find the name and credit the name. I think it's going to be Paul Marchant. Yeah, so Paul Marchant wrote the chapter on geometry and the principles about it. And Adam wrote the section on um biomorphs. Oh, Islamic. So yeah, they're side by side. But this section I've used loads. And what I wanted to talk about just now is, so Ari, you know, we were just talking about the cross and how you describe the proportions and how I describe the proportions. Is because this kind of underlying grid is at the heart of every single shape in this family. Okay, so therefore, can you see this cross? This cross is what I was aiming for when I was correcting the cross, because these proportions are in with all the kind of the rest of the vocabulary of shapes. Does that make sense? And you can see it's an extensive vocabulary of shapes. Cool? Okay. I wanted to show one more thing. because, like I said, I've started my little notebook dedicated to being creative with you guys. So this is last time. This is last time. And this time, I did some color swatches, but this is all the things I wanted to talk about today. And what I was saying about having time to draw the pattern. Maybe you can draw it from the GeoGebra file, but it is there. Maybe I can share it in some format. So I was like, isn't it nice that we actually did analyze a pattern rather than just theoretically talk about them? But the one thing that I wanted to also do is just how we categorize the patterns, because we've already talked about some of the numbers, but you can maybe think of 6-fold patterns, 4 and 8 fold patterns, 5 and 10-fold patterns, 12-fold patterns, and sometimes these families can be connected by the proportion of their rectangles. So 6-fold and 12-fold would fit into a root 3 rectangle. 4 and 8-fold fit into a root 2 rectangle. I'm saying it so slowly. And 5 and 10-fold fit into this rectangle which has golden proportions. So this is something that and then there's other grids as well, but there was so much more to it. I thought, oh my God, I need to just focus on one thing. But let me just read through some of your comments in case I've missed anything. Lots of thank yous. So you are very welcome, Jihan and Sarah and Douglas and Shereen and Veronique and Rola and Tracy. And I can't read your name, but you are very welcome. And Nuria, Kim Hood, what was the program that you used? It was Geogebra. Thanks for that, Alifia. Jihan, thank you as well. Thank you. The session was great and interesting. Did I put in those words to your mouth? It doesn't say it was great. It said it was interesting. So cocky. I'm inspired to do some patterns. Who is Sharmila? Who knows who Sharmila is? I'm Samira. Yasmin, very helpful. Thank you. Great insight into reading patterns. Always seems a bit intimidating. Yasmin, it's going to forever be intimidating, I have to tell you. So even when I was looking at the pattern that Samin sent me from Soleimani Mosque, I was like, whoa. So if something is intimidating, delve, dip, and then leave it for later. Really be ready to leave things for later, because you're not doing something in a structured, organized way that you're doing, say, for example, IGP, or I call it IGP101, but you're doing something which is like categorized for you in a syllabus. It's all out there for you to explore in a haphazard, a chaotic way. And I'm not one to turn it into sort of like an academic way of structuring it. It doesn't appeal to me. But I do think there's something when you're sort of learning for yourself to know that there are ways to still enjoy it and leave things for later and come back to them. Emmy's asked a great question. What about the proportions of 7-fold and 9-fold? Do you know what? For 7-fold, I can't remember. Have I even drawn 7-fold? I don't think I have. For 9-fold, it is based on a rectangle that is different proportions. So there's many different proportions rectangles. But can I just say my memory of the 9-fold is now a little bit scratchy. Is that a word? But it is up here on the wall. Can you see this? This one is my 9-fold rosette. But I didn't repeat it or tile it. So actually, Emmy, I don't even know what the proportions of the rectangles are for the 7 and 9-fold. I'm going to have to leave that for later. But if you put 12 with 9-fold, does it fit into a root 3 triangle? I feel like I've done that with Richard Henry in the Alhambra, and it was a rhombus. So even you asking the question is me going through my brain to see if I know it. But yeah, there's, for all the odd numbered ones, there's so many things that I delve a little bit. Kim Hood, lots to think about here. Thank you. John, will you teach a session just on the proportions? As in the rectangles, Jahan? If you want to unmute yourself just to explain, then I'm happy to like evolve this as you and go wish. So something like that, let me know.
Yes, just what you were just saying, like the proportions
we could
and
do
how
actually.
to get them.
Yeah, we could do. But the thing is, when things, dare I say it, become a little bit too kind of academic and going away from the patterns, it's not so interesting for me. So I don't always love categorizing things because I don't know, it's sort of like it becomes too, I don't know, I want to say the word boring. But But yeah, I think there's some power to it. But if it leads to a pattern or a set of patterns, then I might do it. Or if we just draw those, maybe we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. It has to be interesting for me. I'm such a child. Gwen, are we drawing? Gwen, we've gone over our time. We are not drawing. But I will leave with you this page, kind of hopefully, for you to zoom in and see if you can have a go at. So if anybody does have a go at the pattern, it's there for you to look at. Oh, sorry, Sharmila. That's so funny. Sharmila was telling her her name, not my name. Seems it flexes between an art and a science. Yes, Rachel, 100%. So this is a thing, like, because I'm free from academic settings and I'm a self-employed person who just does stuff on the internet randomly, I really don't want to go back to anything too structured and too academic. Even if people really want it, I would say learn with other people. Because I want to live in the reality I'm living with, which is, I want to learn something in a lifelong way and practice it and really enjoy the process. I don't love things that are too structured and formal, So it is interesting, but it has to be interesting enough for me. I'm so rubbish, sorry. Jan, it's interesting knowing how the proportions and different pole designs go together. Pure geometry and maths, I presume. Yeah, it is interesting. I'm sure I've dabbled in it, but always as a way into something else. So when I did the tenfold series, I loved just the idea of learning rectangles and their proportions. Sorry, the fivefold rectangles and pentagons. So I love it when it leads to something. Khan Academy High School Trigonometry course has some fun ways to explore triangles if you'd like a way to learn with and play, a way to play with and learn about kinds of triangles. Yes, because basically, can I just say these two triangles, this one and this one, are really key to trigonometry. So like the sine, cos, and tan ratios between the sides, this, rather than learn them off by heart, I always used to just sketch these two triangles. So these are really, really cool to know. And I love, love, love that there's a connection to geometry with something I used to love doing when I was a teacher. So yeah, that's a good one. Ari, you're filling in the gaps where I'm saying go elsewhere. So tragic. But I do mean it sincerely. Like it's so important for me to enjoy what I love, like enjoy what I do. Does that make sense? Let me see if I can open up gallery view. Where is gallery view? Hello. I need to get rid of my camera. There we go. Oh, my goodness. Well, guys, we've gone over. I knew at some point that would happen, but thank you so much for asking the questions and just coming along and joining in, or just sitting there on mute and having a good old listen. Maybe you're doing something. Are you cooking? What are you doing? Tell me. But it's nice to see you guys. And this month's kind of content for this IGP101, it was because of Camilla's email that I ended up doing this, because I thought, oh yeah, that's a really good question. And it was really all of a sudden really apparent to me when I started. I just didn't have a way in, so I thought it might be useful. But we'll go back to doing something a little bit more practical and drawing next month. And we have got a pattern in there somewhere, so we'll see how I can figure out how to do that. But yeah, thank you everybody. This probably will end up on YouTube. But I was like a bit scared somehow, like I feel safe in the hands of Patreon pals, but then I like on YouTube, that's the whole world. So I mean, not that the whole world watches everything I do. But yeah, I just was a little bit scared. But thank you so much, and I'm going to bid you farewell. Have a lovely rest of your evening. And if you are a paid Patreon pal, so you've parted with your money to come and join me, then we're going to be doing next. We're going to be delving into this world of patterns. And just in case you're not, I'm going to try and entice you, because it's only like $5. Like, come on, you can have a go. But yeah, no, I know everyone's budgets are different. That's why I did that. So next week, the Zoom will be involving 4 variations. And just to give you the reality check, these are my drawings. Every single one of them is a trial until I got to the one that I wanted to. Okay, and this one, and this one. And yeah, this was the outcome. And
Oh,
so yeah,
wow.
thank you. What?
Beautiful.
Thank you, Kat. So yeah, it was this idea that we've got these 12 and 8 pointed stars and how they can be drawn and um, Rajan is joining us. I'm so excited. I have to be cool around that Rajan, because he's such a boss and he's so modest with it as well. But yeah, I'm really excited that he'll be coming with us. We've already been talking. So yeah, and what's so funny is that I thought I hadn't drawn this pattern before, and I had, and it was from his instructions years ago. So it's like a little circle being completed. Kat, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did. In one of these Instagram shorts or something that came across my phone, I saw you holding a mug that had one of your patterns on it. How do we get one?
Okay, firstly, I was so excited and I was on my way out, so I had my makeup on. So I was like, oh, I could look quite nice. So I just held up my mug. But I've got a fourth wall shop where you can buy stuff. So I put the link. But I don't love this version. Like it's nice. And then I don't like this. I
Yeah,
don't like my name. I don't like that. So I basically have already changed it to a version 2. Oh, look, the original painting's behind me.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
my
so I
favorite pattern.
And you know what? I just wanted to experiment with it. So it's not something I'm doing like in a very committed way. I tell you, it's really tragic how I do these things. But I just wanted to put it out there and test it. And somebody bought it. One person bought it. I was so excited. I was like, I hope she likes it. I hope she doesn't hate me. Like I get so anxious about it. But it's a really good quality mug, and it's print to sell. What's that called? Sell to print, print to order. So yeah, print to
Okay.
order. So yeah, I
Is
think it's
that
a.
so? What's the link? Like, how do I get it?
Oh, I'll put it in the thingy. Where have I put my link? I don't know. Let me just check. You know, I don't
You're
know how I
such a
earn a
good
living.
salesperson.
I'm terrible. And you know what? I pulled a face in the video. I was like, it's very nice. So I was like, yeah, like I know where my link is. Let me see if it's on my okay, so shop tutorial. So in my Instagram highlights, if you go to my profile, if we should be going home at some point, but we're still here. Sorry for like just staying and staying and staying. But let me show you. Okay, here's the mug. Here's the thing. So if you
Yeah.
go to my Instagram highlights, if you go
Yeah.
to my profile, somewhere along there it says shop tutorials, and
Oh, okay. Okay.
that's my shop. That's the link. My shop is open and it's fourth wall. I think it's a really good platform, but I will make it a bit more easier. I will try my best
Okay.
to make
Sounds
it
good.
easier. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks.
Sorry for running over, everybody. Have a lovely weekend and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ramadan Mubarak to you too, guys. And thank you, everybody. Oh, I was about to say, oh, sorry. Let's leave the meeting. Bye, 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 bye. Oh my God, it's still wanting me to assign. Okay, end the meeting for all.